Hey, filthy scum, I'm Vulture Culture, and tonight we're going to be making dark ambient music with what might be the best synthesizer you could possibly use for making dark ambient, which is the Korg Polysix from 1981. Of course, there is a VST version of this from Korg themselves in the Legacy collection, worth checking out. And you could do a lot of what's going on with the Korg Polysix with most plugins or hardware, but there is this wonderful, wild, analog nature to the Korg Polysix that I love so much. And so it's very exciting to be checking this out. I love dark ambient music a la Cryo Chamber and some of those other really great talented artists. We got Itinerant Ghost in the chat. Love their channel. Definitely worth subscribing to. And so we're also using Filterverse, one of my favorite plugins all together right now. And we're going to be using it primarily to add space with delays and reverbs, but Filterverse is much more powerful than just that. This is a little preset I made before the stream. And what's going on here is we have a delay, and we can actually just listen to just the delay real quick. Just a little delay. We have the reverb part. And then we actually have a phaser as well that's helping to widen the stereo image. And so all of those together just creates this incredibly large Mighty Pinto, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Regal, welcome. How are you? So we're going to start by actually just turning Filterverse off, discussing what's going on with the analog hardware side of things, and then we'll jump into Filterverse and create a preset that we could use. And everything in Filterverse can be modulated, or pretty much everything, and we can add as many sources as we want into this, to where we can do all sorts of incredible modulation. It's just what can be done inside of Filterverse is crazy. And so we could set all of this up to modulate all sorts of different things in here. And so that allows Filterverse to become one of those things where it's not just capable of doing delays and reverbs and low pass filters and stuff. It could really be almost an instrument in its own right. So Tom Servo, welcome. Yes, I do love the Polysix for EBM bass, although I have to say I've been doing some sampling of the Korg Monopoly, and that synth really might be the perfect EBM bass synthesizer. I want to do one more versus stream coming up, checking out the Polyvox versus the Monopoly, because it does just seem like very good. But anyways, we're going to worry about Filterverse later. For now, we're going to talk about what's going on with the Polysix. So I'm going to sort of zero out the synth a bit, open the filter up all the way, and just basically create a simple patch so we can talk about what's going on. So the first thing is we've got basically 3 settings on the Polysix as far as oscillators go. We have a sawtooth wave, which is good. It's a lot darker than the sawtooth wave on the Monopoly. It's incredibly dark. And that's one of the things I love about this synth, is it's always going to have that warm, glowy sort of sound to it. And you can hear, because unlike a Juno 106, this synthesizer has voltage controlled oscillators. So there's this natural pitch variation that happens across the keyboard spectrum and so on and so forth, where it just sounds massive all the time. DeCarmick, I can't really decide that for you, only because I have no experience with UHE's Filterscape. But what I can say is that Filterverse is awesome, and my new favorite plugin. I use it almost on every track at this point, just because sometimes I just want to use a little of the drive from the Moog ladder filter. Drive in particular, I really like the way it breaks up. So even if I'm doing something as simple as like, oh, I need a little bit of drive, I'll use Filterverse. If I need some reverb, Filterverse. Need a delay, Filterverse. I need to do some sort of tempo synced sort of thing. Sidechain compression, Filterverse. You could do all of that in there. And in fact, on that preset I was actually using the envelope follower over here to create a little side chaining on the reverb, so it sounded more like a MIDI Verb 2 Bloom sort of sound where it like opens up. Drum says max cutoff and resonance set around 3 makes the synth brighter. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to max it out, actually. We can get some pretty crazy resonance fast. Yeah, the filter is pretty ripping. So anyways, we have a sawtooth wave. We have a pulse wave, which we can take through 0. So what that means is that here we have basically a square wave, and we can take that same sound and thin it out. And what happens is you get those additional harmonics that are missing from a square wave. So a little bit of, I don't even want to call it science, but whatever, bootleg Floridian science is that you've got odd harmonics in a square wave and you have odd end even in a sawtooth wave. So if you want to get some of that back, you can use a thinner pulse. Esteban, I was advised against doing the Kiwitronics upgrade to this Polysix from Ramiro at Severed Machines, my synthesizer tech. He was not a fan of it in the Polysix. He found that it was like glitchy and buggy, so I just stuck with it. I'm repeating what he said. I don't myself have any experience with it, so I'm not trying to slander Kiwi. I'm just didn't do it for that reason. I did bring it up to him, though. DeKarmic asks, is the Korg Legacy Collection's software version of the Polysix sound the same? I've actually done a live stream comparing the Legacy Collection to the hardware, and I think that the Polysix gets like a C+ from me as far as getting the Polysix sound. It is not perfect. The MS-20 is fucking amazing. It sounds really close, but maybe not so much the Polysix. So that's just a thing. Anyways, and then we also have pulse width modulation, which is what I was using earlier. And so what that is that by adding, it's just automatically moving that pulse width, which sort of sounds like the phasing of 2 oscillators. I don't know if that's even really the point of pulse width modulation. Some people say it is, like that was the idea, was to get that sound. But as far as if you want to sort of get this almost CS80 brass type sound that I was using at the beginning of the stream, using pulse width modulation is not a bad idea because you want to add some movement in because you don't have a second VCO per voice on the Polysix to get that. So just a little's fine, right? Sounds beautiful. Then we can introduce the filter. This is a wonderful filter. It is an SSM 2044 filter. The 2040 was used in the Prophet 5 Rev 1 and 2. I think the 44 was used in some other synthesizers. I know it was in the Kwai K3, but it just, I mean, it's just gorgeous. And it's also the implementation. We've done so many comparison videos on this stream, comparison live streams, where we've checked out two synthesizers. And I'm convinced, you know, shooting this out against the K3, for instance, even though they have the same filter, this one sounds better because of the way it was implemented. So you can't even just go on just that. And it gets pretty aggressive pretty quick. It really starts screaming. That's only at about 6. And there's something beautiful about the resonance on this synthesizer in particular. I don't know why. It's one of those things where some synths, when you crank the resonance, it's just kind of like annoying. And then for some reason on a synthesizer like this, when you crank the resonance, it becomes part of the sound in a musical way. I mean, is that a sound that you're going to use often? Probably not, because it's so extreme with the resonance. But I just wanted to play something quickly that shows you, yeah, you know, you can actually create some pretty cool stuff. Aquatic, you've got that Moog Muse coming, so that's going to be really exciting to hear what you have to say about it. I can't imagine that that synthesizer is not going to deliver. Really cool. So anyways, by bringing the resonance down, we're already getting this more alive sound. I'm going to add some more release. Polysix release is just so good. I don't know what it is about the envelope shape, but it's just like perfect. And then we have some effects. So we've got, I've had the effects off at this point, but we have a chorus. Which is really a thick, stacked type sound. We have a phaser, which is great. This is my favorite sound. ADHDville, welcome to the stream. So the phaser is great. And then if you want to get those sort of string machine sounds, do that as well. So in this case, I was using just a subtle amount of phaser because although the chorus is great, the phaser has a little bit more drama to it. And there was just something about the way when that was fed into the reverb that I was really enjoying. Dekarmic, I don't really know what I was playing. I just sort of, you know, freestyle some stuff. But definitely when it comes to playing the sort of dark ambient stuff, I would say hanging around the 9th chord. So a little bit of music theory here. Most of you guys are going to be familiar with a minor chord, right? So C minor, that's going to be C, E flat, and G, right? If we wanted to add the 7th, that's going to be, what is that, B flat? So And then if we want to make it a 9th chord, we need to go and add D on top of that. So that's basically a 3rd step between each note. So the 1st, 3rd, what is this? 5th, 7th, and 9th, right? So that's that very classic ambient chord that you hear all time and time again. And sounds very beautiful. So as far as that goes, we could turn on like the arpeggiator, for instance, and play that thing. And then to kind of finish the sound off, we're going to give it a little of that brassy sort of thing. So dial in resonance to take. So we can get kind of like a clean brass sort of sound. You'll notice we don't need much envelope intensity here to get this sort of sound. And then if we add up to like maybe 3 resonance, for getting wonderful SSM filter. If we take it up to 5, that's going to be kind of extreme. Not bad. I really love pushing the resonance on the Alpha Juno, which we checked out last week, was the best synthesizer I thought for synthwave. For this one, this particular type of sound, I don't think it needs quite as much resonance. So kind of like a middle of there. Something to give it some of that brightness, and we can increase the phaser a bit. And just so it has that kind of nice, almost like 2 oscillators detuned beating against each other, but instead we just have a lot of movement in there. Lot of sound going on there, which is beautiful. We can actually turn the release down because we're going to put it through so much reverb. We're not going to need a whole lot of release. Also worth saying, we have a modulation generator, which is vintage Korg speak for LFO. And so I'm going to route that to the VCA, the amplifier, and then control the rate here. Oh, maybe that's just the modulation. Maybe this wheel always is routed there? I don't know. Well, there we go. That's giving it that sound. Sorry, I was afraid for a second that something was wrong. Might have to do with the attenuator, actually. Maybe not. I remember it being more intense, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just kind of chill. Anyways, that's a great way, like an extra level of expression to have kind of on hand. And this is a great synthesizer because, you know, unlike a lot of synths where there's so much going on that it's kind of buried and, you know, you've got to do menu diving and stuff like that. With this, everything, what you see is what you get. This is all there is in the synth. It's very simple. And so it begs you to actually play as you're going, you know, to change the cutoff. right. So anyways, I think we've got a pretty good starting point. Kind of nice brassy sound. Let's go ahead and initialize Filterverse. And I'm going to turn it on now. So we'll just get more volume. Right? Sounds good, doesn't it? Hey, Jamie Newman, how's it going? It's been a little bit. And so, of course, the most important part of dark ambient is going to be the reverb. So when we pull up the filters that we have currently, now there's going to be more filters in Filterverse. This is in public beta right now. I put the link in the description. I think it's like $89 right now, which is a pretty great deal. And what's so great about this plugin is they're just going to keep adding more and more stuff. And some of these are crazy. We've got like coils is a new one I haven't even played with, which models the coils of a physical spring. So that's pretty cool using comb filters. Dave, welcome to the stream. How's it going? So anyways, what we're going to be using though is Space, which is basically the Filterverse version of their Comet, I believe is what it's called, plugin, their reverb plugin. So why don't we just hear how this sounds? Don't really hear much, and that's because right now the size is very small, so we have to turn that down. But you'll notice it still sounds kind of like almost like I don't know, like a gymnasium or something. And that's because we have no feedback. So as soon as we turn it up to about 6 or so, we're going to get a lot of reverb. And one of the biggest things about this reverb is, so this ends up being your size parameter, right? Let's increase the resonance even further. So this is your feedback again. Still pretty small, so you got to open it up a bit, and then we'll get to really, really big Vangelis type sounds. Broke Rabbit, welcome. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. 79 is even better. So what's great about this plugin is on its own, this reverb sounds fine. Let's open it up even bigger. It sounds good, but it also sounds a little bit like we're not all the way there because we're not using any diffusion yet. That's just the delay line. So as we increase the diffusion, let's try 50% first. And so that's going to have a great effect. I love using diffusion all the way. And immediately you can hear that it kind of smooths out those jagged edges that you might be picking up on. Chris says, if this filter plugin, wouldn't this be mostly helpful for like a digital sense to stand out with a little more warmth? So we can certainly make it warmer by increasing the dampening. So we can actually take it all the way into like dark lexicon territory if we wanted. Really dark. I was using it somewhere around 50 is kind of like mid-rangey. Increase that resonance even further, but a little bit less, like somewhere around 30 sounds really good to my ears. So that's a really nice place as far as I'm concerned. Sounds really big. So around 30 dampening. It's like you still get the high end, but it's not quite, because at all the way undampened, it sounds unnatural to my ears. It's like a lot of high end, but not like 20 kilohertz, right? There still seems to be some point where it chops off, and you know it doesn't give it that sound. I mean, it's for somebody, I'm sure it's, you know, if you like those really bright 80s reverbs, maybe that's for you, but for something like what we're doing tonight, I think somewhere around 30 is really good. Synthcat, welcome to the stream. How's it going? And then really the critical thing is adding detune. So right now, this reverb never sounds metallic to my ears, but metallic reverbs use modulating the taps inside of the feedback path to break up any sort of metallic resonances you might get. And so detune is that parameter. So, you know, you can really hear the difference in how lush the reverb sounds. Really great. And then we can even take that all the way up to 100. You can hear it kind of pitch bend a little. And, you know, this is a sound that may or may not work for what kind of material you're feeding it. To me, that's like taking it too far. And this, you know, even with a single synth, you can actually get away with quite a bit of detune. But if you try using, for instance, a lot of times I'll have like one reverb plugin that I'm using on the whole mix, and I'll route a lot of stuff to it. Too much detune then, and you're going to just get, you know, mud. So. 80's pushing it. Let's try, you know, and especially if you play like a dissonant chord, that'll give you a clue. So this is a what would it be? Dominant add 4. That sounds pretty good around there. I'm not mad at it. Here we go. Major 7th. Still a little bit of noise, it sounds like, in there almost, which I don't think it's actual noise like old vintage units. I think it's just that modulation is breaking it up. So 50% detune is probably great. We also have pre-delay, which is super cool. Jay, welcome to the stream. How's it going? DeCarmick, I'm super old school in the sense that I use a DAW. I guess that's not very, very old school, but for me, it's old school. It's like, I don't have any cool hardware sequencers or anything. I just use Reaper. We also have pre-delay. So a value. I love that you can either do smooth control here. So this is like tempo synced pre-delay, right? But you also can click these values. So you can just jump to 250 or even 2 seconds. So let's hear how that sounds. Here's the reverb as is. I'll bring it down a bit just for the sake of, you know, like these reverb tails can go on for forever. With 250 milliseconds of pre-delay, we're going to get a different kind of sound. So you can see it takes a second for it to come in. Now, if we put it to 2000 milliseconds, we'll really get a cool sound. Right? Very cool. Probably a little extreme. Maybe somewhere around 1 second might be interesting as well. And of course, you can tempo sync that all the way down to 1 bar as well. Really cool little trick you can use. Akai DPS 16. I don't know that one. Yeah, I need to get into hardware sequencers. And I always ask Nick, like, what's the hardware sequencer to get? And the response is always, there's so many. And you get into shift registers and all of that. But at some point when I start building out a modular setup, that'll be a fun sort of thing. In this case, I actually don't want any pre-delay myself. I think this is not necessary for this type of sound. I'd be curious to know, Itinerant Ghost, if you use pre-delay at all. I kind of think for this type of genre, a lot of the times you kind of want that reverb to be glued to the sound, and so I don't need that pre-delay. Although a little might help increase the space. I don't know. You'll notice that this whole time I've been using the third slot here, so we actually have two other slots that we could use. And then we have a routing matrix, so we almost get into some sort of like DX7 style programming that can occur here. But it's actually pretty simple. In this case, I wanted to make sure I used the reverb last, but we can always move it around as we play with what's going on. So I'm happy with that reverb sound. Actually, I'm going to just increase the resonance to maybe 7 is a good value, kind of like in between there. Now let's go check out Tempole. So we've got a couple... Tempong. I really like Tempong. This is a new one for me. And what this is their delay plugin. So right now, I think we'll get an 8th note, right? Right? And you'll notice it goes one time through the left and right channels and then stops. And that's because we have no feedback, which should be pretty simple. Might be more obvious, too, if I turn this into a pluck by lowering the attack here. So we can get that sort of sound. Gerald, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Itinerant, yeah, that's what I was guessing, that most dark ambient music doesn't use a whole lot of pre-delay, but I'm sure there's some examples where I'm wrong with that. So anyways, we have a bunch of things we could do. First off, we could control what setting we want. So if we want like a slower, we could, of course, again, we have smooth control. So if we want a value in between a quarter note and an 8th note, we can find it, right? Or we can just hit these values and get all sorts of stuff. So right, so we could get that sort of thing if we wanted to. And then one of the biggest things is that all of this stuff can get modulated, but I mean, it'll get so crazy. So we have all of these different sort of patterns the taps can follow. So if we go to center, this should just be center, right? Or crosses, I suppose. Then we have left, center, right. This one's really useful where... right? You can hear how it moves. And then left, center, right, center. So... right? One time through. And of course, if we increase the feedback, it'll just keep following that pattern. I wouldn't call it necessarily like the spread knob, because what's happening here is it's where the taps are placed in the stereo field. And another thing is like one of my favorites actually is left, left, right, right. So again, you can just hear. Right? Or it's following that pattern. And you can also control that. So if you wanted it to start on the right, right? It's moving that stuff. Yes, all of this is in beta. I'm using the beta version of Filterverse. You can purchase it now. It's a public beta version. And I actually believe Adrian from the company sent me an email with this version of it. And so there might be a couple of things in this that aren't public yet, but they will be very soon. Ed from Earth, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. But so you can control all of that. You can move it to the center. So just really cool. I mean, the basic is probably going to be fine, or you could flip it if you wanted. You could move it to a dotted note if you wanted to go back to the eighth. Dotted eighth notes sound beautiful. Add some feedback. Really beautiful. And we can add some dampening. And this is where the magic is for me, because sometimes it's nice to have a nice bright digital delay, but I quite like a dark delay. So I'm using Filterverse J as my effects plugin, and there are built-in effects, so I have the phaser on the Polysix on right now. Tracy, welcome. How's it going? Maybe a little less dampening, actually. Right? Very beautiful. Lots of stereo width, right? And there's all sorts of cool stuff that could be done. And we've got this nice stop button where you can use on both the reverb and the delays just to kill that in case, you know, you don't want it to keep going. And where this gets really crazy is we have all sorts of ways that we could modulate this. So I'll just show you very quickly. I can open up the sequencer, which is actually just a sine wave right now, but we could change that to all sorts of different patterns, make your own patterns. And then by controlling the shape too, we can have this step into all sorts of different types of stuff. So yeah, it's pretty crazy what can be done. But we can modulate everything in this plugin just by increasing this amount. So you'll see that it's now going to change the pitch. And just like a tape delay, we're getting really crazy amounts because it doesn't take much to get that. So even a very small amount will give us some modulation. You can hear how it has that almost like lo-fi sort of sound by using a very small value. So if I use like 0.1, right, that's enough to give us a lo-fi sort of vinyl. Just a little bit. No, I'm not using a beta version of the VST. You're hearing the actual analog hardware. That would be hilarious though. Yeah, this is very good. But what you could do, for instance, if you didn't want to do that and you wanted to get some more stereo width, is you could modulate this. So you'll see what's happening with the feedback. Where it's like the echoes are fading in and out. Right? It's interesting. I guess it kind of like kills it if it goes too low. But where this gets super interesting is everything in Filterverse could then be split, so it's got a positive and negative. So now what's happening is this is the left channel and the right channel, and if I increase or decrease one or the other, you'll see that it's modulating the left and right channel separately. And again, I could do the same thing here. And you can even modulate them by different amounts. So if I wanted to detune this by like 0.5, that'll give us, let's go negative 0.15. So now we have different detune amounts in the left and the right ear. You can hear a little bit of modulation in there. And this is all just to make it possible to have more interesting sorts of sounds. We don't really need a lot of this in this case. I think it's okay just to be a basic delay, but I wanted to show you guys that it is possible. So I'm just going to negative, whoa, that'll be crazy. Negative 0.1 for now, I think is fine. It sounds very nice. Let's dampen it a little further. I think that sounds pretty good, and almost bucket brigade delay. A way we could make that sound more like a bucket brigade delay is we could use the bread and butter filter, which is my personal favorite, where this is the one that sounds more like a Moog filter. So, and just driving it and bringing the cutoff down quite a bit. Kind of has that sound. We could drive it even further and bring it closer to a bandpass filter, because a lot of times you lose a little low and high end. Starting to have that sort of really great bucket brigade delay type sound. We can increase the resonance. But I find that increasing the resonance is going to give you too honky of a... Like, to me, that's going to be too much in there as far as it goes. So now we could turn this on and it's routed directly into the reverb. So we're going to kind of lose the delays. And it sort of sounds like we have pre-delay on because the delays are we're only hearing the delays in the reverb signal. So that's kind of not what we want to do. So what we want to do is actually bring the dry wet amount down. That's one thing we could do. Another thing we could do is adjust the routing. So in this case, we could say, go into the routing matrix and say we want 2 and 3, what would it be? 1 and 2 to be parallel. So now in this configuration, they're all parallel. So what that means is that the delay will be its own signal path and come out clean, and the reverb's its own signal path. So none of the delay is going into the reverb, and they're both coming out clean. Tracy, I think the reason I picked this synthesizer in particular, and it's a really great question to ask, is because this synthesizer is so wild. This is my sauvage synthesizer, as far as one of my, well, I always describe it as the furthest thing from a VST. This thing has the most analog magic in it as far as all of my synths go, even the really expensive one up there. Because of the way the tuning drifts in and out, and the SSM filter just sounds amazing. I really love this synthesizer. And I think for dark ambient music, of course you can use plugins. I think a lot of people are making dark ambient with a lot of plugins and digital synths. And that's a big part of it too, because if you want like breathy, industrial type stuff, this is going to be warm and glowy. But it does, when you crank the resonance, it just invites you to modulate the sound with your hands as opposed to doing it with programming. And I really think that adds an extra element of performance to something like dark ambient music, because dark ambient isn't so much about, you know, fast chord changes or a lot of melody and stuff. It's more about creating a mood. And so to me, music like that needs a lot of interesting modulation going on. So that's how I would answer that question. Yeah. Walter, welcome to the stream. How's it going? I don't know about that. AF Major Production, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Dekarmic, yeah, it could be because it's simple, but I would probably use a much simpler, cheaper, modern synthesizer for that purpose, so everybody could use it. What do you think of Hans Zimmer Legend Itinerant? So, you know, to answer Tracy, could try feeding 2 into 3. Is there a way to do that? 2 into 3 and... guess we could do 2 and 3 into 1. So we could use the... what would that be if we did 2 and 3 into 1? Oh, it's funny how it like retains its number depending on where you started from. So if I wanted to do... this like this and use this one. So now the tempo, I can just turn the reverb off by hitting it there. Right, so that could be a way that we get this bucket brigade sound. That's one approach, right? Let's try another approach. So I'm going to go back to routing all of these into routing. How do I want to do this? 2 into 1 and 3. So the way we're going to do that is, can I copy one of these? I think there's a way to copy these. I forget what it is. Can I control drag that? Okay, so looking at the routing again, we want 2 to go into 3. I want that to be 2. How do I get that to be 2? I want the bread and butter to be 2. This is interesting. I don't know how to swap these as far as it goes. Because what I'm trying to do is create a phaser on one of these nodes. Well, one way I could do it really quick is just, you know, set this back up and make it a phaser, right? Using next phase here, and then just set this tempole up, or tempong, I keep saying tempole, but to about what I had going on before, and yeah. Right? Yeah, that's pretty good. Paul, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yes, Mercury X is Ben Jordan's pick, isn't it, for the best reverb plugin? I think this one is pretty good, though, and I would challenge anybody to... I really think Polyverse is killing it right now with what they're doing. Just think that sounds amazing. Now, the trick, I'm going to turn off 1 and 3, but 2 is turned on, and what we're going to do with 2 is we have a little phaser here. And what's interesting about this phaser is you'll notice not a lot's happening as I move this, and even if I use a second sequencer here, set to, I can turn the tempo sync off, and we can just kind of pick any rate we want, and modulate this pretty with a wide amount. I'm not really noticing. I'll turn the phaser off on the synth real quick just to see the difference here. I guess it is doing something, but what I've really noticed is that as you increase the depth here, you start to really hear the sound more. increasing the spread, I'm going to slow it down even a little further. Starting to get a pretty analog sounding phaser. We can increase the number of peaks. If you want to give it the this Boss analog phaser, super phaser PH2. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this pedal. It's got like a really sharp phaser characteristic, and you can get that by, it's a vintage pedal from the 80s, by increasing the resonance. Oh, we can turn off the modulation here. Right. I'll increase this back up a bit. An option. I don't actually need that sound. It's interesting the way if you play with depth, you get all sorts of different kinds of sounds, right? So, I don't know, where do you guys think? I think that sounds pretty beefy. Slow it down even a little further. Nice chewy phasery sound. And so now what I'm going to do is turn the phaser back on the synth and then modulate this positively and negatively. So now as one side channel goes up, the other one's going down, and it's going to be huge. This is better with headphones, of course. Because it's just so chewy. Okay, so now that's going to be fed both into the delay and the reverb. So we're essentially, we could do something like this with the flanger to get sort of more of like a chorusy sound. But to me, I quite like using phasers actually for this purpose. And I don't think people use phasers enough. 7.5 seems pretty good. Man, it's just beautiful, isn't it? Massive. Yeah. Yeah, filter combinations are so important, Aquatic, and we can take all of this stuff further. So, for instance, instead of modulating this with this amount, we could also modulate it with like random and increase the rate here. And this is going to get almost like a sample and hold type sound. Right? Which is, unfortunately, in this case, it's actually a little bit, what we need is a meta knob here, and we're going to add just like a small amount of glide, and then we will modulate the meta knob with randomness. And so we could just increase that a bit. And so now we can modulate this with the meta knob. Control that amount. So what we could get are, you know, more like a smooth sample and hold type sound. Maybe even like 10%. Maybe even a little more. Let's just bring it up. Yes, and 40 Thieves. This is, of course, the Sunglasses at Night synthesizer Corey Hart used. I wish I could make it to NobCon as well, Aquatic. Sean Johnson, welcome. How's it going, my friend? So this is a way that if we want to take this into like a more interesting, I guess I would say, like rhythmic sort of space, as opposed to just doing this sort of thing, we're actually now able to have a more dimension to this than just a regular reverb patch, right? It seems like I can increase that glide a bit, which is nice. So anyways, by adding in the delay and the reverb, we don't probably need quite as much of the reverb. So what we could do is also bring that down just a little bit, so we hear more of the delays. Kind of like that sound, so let's crank it up. Missing you, Tracy. Now we can kind of go into the murky sort of space. So yeah, depending on how much of that type of sound you want in there, that's an option. Here's another thing. If we wanted to, say, make this sound more like a Bloom preset in the MIDI verb, the way we could go about doing that is actually by using an envelope follower. So in this case, you can see that the in, left, and right channels, so just what's going in here, is what's feeding this. And so what we're going to do is leave it with the threshold follow, and we're going to bring the attack down. I'm going to give it like 3 milliseconds just to avoid any potential distortion, and then increase the release to about 750 or so. And what that's going to do is, if I modulate the we do it a couple of different ways. I think we should do it over here with the phaser, and we can actually for now turn the modulation down quite a bit. And what we'll do is we'll modulate the filter out, which is being fed into, again, if you look at the routing matrix here, you can see 2 is being fed into 3 and 1 separately. So the envelope follower, if we negatively modulate this, and I'll make it extreme at first by like -20, you'll hear that as audio comes in, it's ducking it out of the way. Should be anyways. See if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it down like all the way. So it's only feeding in sort of like the real tails of that. If I bring the attack out. Oh yeah, you could use quite a bit because it's following the amount that comes in. We could use another envelope follower set to approximately the same settings to get even more of that. So if we want to further modulate it, get like 24 decibels of gain reduction. You can hear that it's very dry at first and only the end is opening up. So that's one way we could do it if we wanted to just sort of duck some of the sound out of the way. Here we could probably bring this back up now and bring the temp along back up. So if I use a really short sound, we're not going to get a whole lot out of it. Get that sort of thing going on. But another way we could do this is instead of having the envelope follower here, we could route it out here and have it pull it down on both of the delay and reverb. So that sounds like this. What would be a good note to play right now? And again, you can see it's not ducking it that much. You can see the gain reduction. 8 decibels or so I want to double modulate. And now it's giving us that really big sound. But as I'm playing the keys, it gets drier, and then as the sound from the keyboard dies off, you don't hear it as much. So with a slower attack sound, to my ears, that's too much. Like, we don't need quite that much. But I wanted to exaggerate it so you could hear what I'm doing. Yeah, it's definitely, this patch has that Polysix sound. Definitely has more of that bloomy sort of sound. In fact, I don't think it needs the double modulation at all. It's good. With the ensemble on. With the arpeggio. do a little arpeggiation here. This is an SSM filter. Thad, no. Although that doesn't mean it's not an incredible synthesizer. I don't want that to be the takeaway from that answer, but... We are aquatic, it's true. I'm glad you did too, Sean. I wouldn't even go that far. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think Korg or anybody has emulated the Polysix great yet. If I get my shit together, program a plugin, I guess this would be the first one I would do. But the thing is yeah, the Polysix just has its own sound, really unique. Plugin is good to kind of remind you vaguely of the hardware, but don't get me wrong, Thad. I love software. There's a lot of really great software synthesizers. I would probably just not go into purchasing any piece of software thinking I'm going to get that Polysix sound. There's other sounds that are really great, really well emulated by software companies. I mean, Softube just came out with the CS80. That's got to be the most famous vintage synth sound ever, and they do an incredible job with their modeling. So I would just go into it with that expectation. And Op6 is an incredible FM synthesizer, basically the Mac Daddy DX7, but it's not really going to get you there, even though they do have an emulation of the Polysix filter built into Op6. It's actually the default filter, I think. Interesting with the attack all the way out, you just hear nothing. This is a really cool way to make a beautiful, dreamy bed, right, of sounds. Little hints. By using some key tracking here. Letting those high notes glimmer through. It's fascinating that by controlling the attack, we're also controlling the filter, right? Because of how much time it takes to get that filter up to be audible. Yeah, Aquatic, I don't think I think as soon as you hear the Moog Muse, you're not going to want a Polysix. It's really cool. You can morph between this kind of pluck to this all the way, like with the attack at 0, you've got a pluck. At the attack around 4 or 5, you've got this sort of like little glimmery, like reverse pluck sound. And then all the way at attack 10, you've got nothing. And then somewhere around 7 or 8, you've got like a warm, brassy bed of sound. Real subtle. Like glass. Oh, it's so gorgeous, isn't it? Then we can go to plucks. Just a 4-stage. It's only got one envelope, so it's sharing that for the filter and the amplifier. And yeah, like 4 or 5, you get this really interesting, sort of beautiful glimmery sound. And then at 6, you've just got like wide open. So it's fascinating to me how you get all of these different sounds depending on what you're looking for. But I'd be very happy to show you again real quick. So I'm going to just mute Filterverse real quick. And we could just cover the... If I turn the effect... You can hear that I have pulse width modulation on right now, actually. Which sounds really fat. We could also use just the pulse width here. I really appreciate it, Nick. I've been enjoying them too. They've actually been a lot more fun to do some sound design. And then, of course, we got a sawtooth wave. And I didn't mention earlier, but we do have the sub oscillator, so we could go an octave down. Or 2 octaves down. And using the VCA in gate mode is great for bassline-y type stuff. Dap Manipulate, how you doing? Right, if you want to do that type of thing. But I think for dark ambient, you know, once you throw that into some goddamn giant Filterverse, well, maybe I'm changing my mind. That actually kind of sounds cool. Well, fuck me. This is good. Yeah, without a doubt, Scott, you know, the Kiwi 6 mod is going to give you a lot. The stability is what I was worried about. Do you ever have any issues with it? Oh, this sounds a lot nicer than I was expecting. Let's throw some chorus on. And going into next phase, why don't we increase the depth a bit more now, and we can increase the meta knob too, so we can get more of that sound to it, right? Where we get a little sample and hold. I'm kind of biased towards the sounds of like the Cryo Chamber label, Tracy, and even Itinerant Ghost. I listen to a lot of Itinerant Ghost music. So that to me is what the genre of dark ambient is. Although I'm sure some people think of dark ambient more as just any ambient music that's dark, but there's definitely a thing called dark ambient that you might be more of an expert on than I am. This is just kind of my rough thing. I do think like Itinerant uses a lot of textures. So for instance, if we wanted to, we could add, right now I've got actually a rain sample that's being routed into Filterverse. So we can hear how that sounds. I'm going to unmodulate the, I'll just turn the phaser off for now. So let's add a little bit of rain while we're playing, you know. So again, by adding a little texture in there, right? A little something. Thoughtforms does a lot of videos covering using romplers to get really great ambient sounds, like the Korg Triton. Definitely worth checking out his channel. So what we could do, Nick, is we could route a... so now I've got the delay feeded into space. I'll turn that off for now, and I'm going to add another space here. And I'm going to unmodulate it from everything because right now it's being modulated. And we could add, like, let's say we could create kind of like a weird space, like an undiffused, undamped. We're going to need some detuning and no pre-delay. So on its own, it's just going to sound a little odd. Almost again like a little bit of a so it's giving it kind of like a weird space, and then what we could do is instead of using any sort of tempo plugin here, what we could do is unmodulate this as well, and we could even do something like using the new coils. So I really want to check this out and see what this is like. So let's just listen to coils real quick. Really interesting sort of spring sounds. You can kind of turn it into a weird reverb. Can make it stereo. Wow, that's a dope, dark spring reverb sound. Very cool. Probably don't need quite as much volume. So why don't we use that and then feed that into space? So now that coils sound is going into the space verb, so it's going to really change it. It's losing control. It's panicking. Well, I'll have to check that out, Mighty Pinto. Oh my God, a wildfire 9 miles away. Please survive, Nick. I need you to live. Oh my God. Yeah, so this is now using, instead of making like a big drone, plucky type stuff, now what we're going for is something more like a, going back to those ninth chords to get that sort of, beautiful sound, and using a really slow attack. Gorgeous. This reverb is goddamn pornographic. Another way you could add grit, going back and making sure nothing's modulated here. Let's just add some bread and butter, which is their Moog emulation, Tracy. And I'm just going to go to just a standard. I don't really need much. I might cut out 5K, and then just boosting the drive alone will add a lot of grit to the sound. So. Also use the high pass filter and then cut out everything below 500 if we wanted to have like a much, like right now it's just overloading everything, which I think is great, but not for everybody. So this will clean it up substantially. fucking come on. Mike, I'm using Filterverse for all of that. And you know, what's important to say here is it would be hard to get this sound with something that's not the Polysix, in my opinion. It's just a great synthesizer, and here's the plugin off and just the sweep on its own. It's very beautiful, but that too is beautiful. So, you know, I don't, maybe even just cutting out like 100 hertz might help. I think it's too much, and I don't need any drive. I think it sounds fine on its own. This coil sounds really cool, really dark. I'm really happy. I'm happy, Nick, that you were like, hey, does anybody play around with reverbs? Let's try, I want to hear just coils on its own again. I'll turn the Also, basically any reverb in Filterverse can be turned into an infiniverb, but just by taking it to 10. That'll just like keep fucking going. Really interesting though. I don't really think it would need dampening. Just because it's already pretty damp, isn't it? So we probably don't need as much resonance now because of that. So we could even try bringing this down. Resonance is feedback for Filterverse. Definitely finished it off with some dark drones. So one way you do that is by adding the sub oscillator. And then just really cranking the resonance. And that'll give us, you know, a lot of that sound that we're looking for, because we could get that sort of creepy dissonance in there. What's one more thing I was thinking about that would work? I'm blanking on it now. I was like, oh, I got an idea. That'll be really cool for a drone, but it's gone now. Unison, right? Because we can fire all 6 voices at once now. Really, really, really big. I mean, just so much that can be done with this. So just dropped the $80 on Filterverse. Awesome. And now I'm pricing out the Polysix. I think it's great. If you've got a monopoly, very similar sound. I like both of them. I myself prefer the Polysix just because of how I'm like a polyphonic player. Even though tonight I basically just used it mostly monophonically. But the monopoly, I don't know that I would say that someone needs to have both, Mike. If you have a monopoly, it probably gets you most of the way. And it's going to have the same thing with the filter. Lots of cool options with the monopoly you don't get with the Polysix, but you also get the cool effects with the Polysix you don't have on that. And you can play 6 voices at once. It's just sub-oscillators and stuff like that. So I think that's a good place to call it for tonight. I feel like I have demonstrated how to maybe have some ideas when it comes to dark ambient music. Hopefully, showed off both of these really great instruments, the Polysix and Filterverse, because that's what Filterverse is at this point for me. It's part of my instruments. It's not just a reverb. It's not just this. It's so funny to me because I think 90% of people, when they watch the, trailer for Filterverse or something, they're going to just think about this thing as being like, oh, what can you do with Filterverse? I wonder what you can do with it. I bet you can do, I bet if you route like an LFO to the filter, you can do this. Right? And just do like fucking stupid dubstep stuff. But that's not what, and I'm not saying all dubstep's stupid, but you guys know what I'm talking about when I say stupid dubstep stuff. Like, this plugin is so much more deep than I think most people realize. And I just think it's great and a lot of fun to mess around with. I need to read up on the routing matrix a little bit better because it seems like as you drag stuff around, it retains its number. And it would be great if, because with the routing, I'd like to be able to drag these around and have them change what's going on. Like maybe I want 1 to feed into 2 and 3, but then all of a sudden I change my mind and I want 3 to feed into 1 and 2 or something like that. So I wish the numbers didn't drag with it, and that might be like a setting in here. I feel like it probably is, and I just need to, I've read the manual once a while back, and I need to peruse it again. But in the meantime, my thing is just to say, hopefully to inspire somewhere to get out there and make some really cool music, because we can lust over vintage gear as much as we want, and I have lusted the hardest out of most of you. Not all of y'all though, but some of y'all for sure. And Coils is super exciting. And Itinerant says, I had not used Filterverse as cleverly as you showed tonight. I've been messing around with it tonight and I'm blown away. Top job. I'm really appreciative, Itinerant. Your music is an inspiration to me. I want to make cool dark ambient like you one day. So I really appreciate you being here this stream to sort of confirm what I'm doing or stop me if I lost controls. Very fun stream tonight. I'm glad you guys have been enjoying these more genre-driven live streams. Next week, we're going to be covering Darkwave, so stuff like Sisters of Mercy, Joy Division, that type of sound. Susie and the Banshees. Bauhaus, which I actually took my mom, Vulture Mom, to go see once. Very famous Darkwave band. So we're going to be covering some of the sounds that they used and how to make that type of music next week. But for this week, anyways, I think that's a good place to call it for tonight. And so I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Continue to be excellent, and I'll see you in the next live stream.